Karl Rove with us right now. Karl, excellent political mind, really good writer, best-selling author. Karl, I don't expect you to be a market soothsayer, although you're pretty good at reading markets. They seem to be either oblivious to what's going on with the personnel shakeup or not too concerned about it and more focused on just big macro issues that look good, as Charlie said.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. I think they're focused on fundamentals, and corporate profits are strong. I think they do believe there's going to be a corporate tax cut. I'm with Charlie. I'm not certain how much. When you got a personal income tax system in which 50% of the filers pay 1% of the tax, and the top 50% of filers pay 99% of the tax, if you are only focused on taking the people who've got a modest tax burden and cutting their taxes, it'll have an effect in their ability to spend, but it is not going to be as powerful as the corporate tax side, which is going to be more of a supply side, encouraging investment in the economy, particularly if we can get repatriation of some of those trillions of dollars in foreign earnings.
But on this, I'm not optimistic. I think there'll be a tax cut, to your point. It will be about a reconciliation. It won't be dramatic tax reform, just in my opinion. The rich will be left out of it. And I don't know if that's going to be everything that everyone was looking forward to when this presidency started.
Yeah. Well, I do have confidence that they will get a tax cut, that they will get a corporate tax cut reduction. The question is how big.
I just don't think it's going to be eye-popping off the charts.
Yeah, well, I agree. But I do think they're also going to get repatriation of foreign earnings, because this is one of these weird moments where there is bipartisan support for doing that. And if that happens, then I think we're going to get a good economic bump from that.
You know, you talk about bipartisan support. A number of Senate Democrats have put out, Karl, this sort of condition plan for working with Republicans. Part of their demands, 45 of 48 Democratic senators signed on to this. No tax cuts for the top 1%. No fast tracking, in other words, don't use the reconciliation process, and no deficit finance cuts. What do you make of that?
Well, that's their opening gambit, and they're feeling rather bullish right now in the aftermath of the failure of the Republican health care effort, but we'll see how it goes over the long haul. You'll notice that they had you know, some Democrats who are privately saying to their Republican colleagues, we want to work with you on this, and the Republicans are not going to give up the advantage of doing this through reconciliation.
And by the way, 3 Democrats did not sign that letter. Not surprisingly, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota, Joe Donnelly of Indiana, all up for re-election next year in states that Donald Trump won last year.
Yeah, and I would suspect there are going to be more Democrats. Nelson of Florida, McCaskill of Missouri, maybe even Tester of Montana, who are going to be saying, you know what, we're not going to insist on that whole load. We want to get something in return for this, and they'll find some face-saving way to say, well, you didn't cut taxes for the people at the top of it, and you know, I wanted to encourage economic growth in my state and the country. So I agree with you, though, on the fundamental point that I think you're making, which is at the beginning of the year we had expectations that we're going to have a very big, robust bit of tax reform and a tax cut. Now we've slimmed down our expectations for the amount of reform that we've got, and also, I suspect, reduced somewhat our expectations for the breadth of the tax cut itself.
You know, well, I have you here, and I didn't have a chance to talk to since he did this, but John McCain's no vote on the skinny repeal. What did you think of that?
I'm mystified. First of all, he went to the floor, said we need to do this in a bipartisan way. I'm going to vote to proceed on the so-called skinny reform measure because I want to have the process continue. He then joined with 3 other Republican senators and said we want absolute commitment from the Speaker of the House that if the skinny reform passes the Senate, that it will not be taken up immediately by the House and passed in its current form. Instead, we'll go to a conference committee and then we'll grind through this process more. And the Speaker of the House abased himself in front of, you know, Senator McCain, Senator Graham, and 2 others and said, you have my word that we won't take up the measure if the Senate passes it. We'll refer it to a conference committee, and then the process will go forward. And having received that commitment, McCain then turns around and votes no on the floor. So it's beyond me. The one thing he insisted upon, he got, and he, rather than, you know, by starting off saying, I'm going to vote for something in order to continue the process, he then turns around and votes no and stops the process. It just doesn't make much sense.
I'm wondering, too, Karl, what your thoughts are on the changes going on within the White House. We have a lot of personnel who come and go. Anthony Scaramucci, the latest, General John Kelly running things as chief of staff. He has said, and the president backs him up, that everyone goes through him. Will they?
Well, I hope they do, because everyone inside the White House needs to know that they work in an organization, and at the top of that organization is between them and the president as the chief of staff. Does that mean they never walk into the Oval and share a thought? No, that doesn't mean that. But it does mean that they don't use their privilege of talking to the president in order to end run the policy process in the White House. Look, I worked for a president who insisted that his chief of staff, first Andy Card and then Josh Bolten, be seen by all of the senior people in the White House as their boss. Andy Card was my boss. And sure, I could tell the president something, but I better make certain that I was not end running the policy process and that Andy Card was aware of what I was saying and doing.
But
and
if you're a relative, it's a little different, right? I mean, Ivanka Trump was saying she looks forward to serving alongside General Kelly. What did you make of that?
Well, this is a problem. You know, in the West Wing, you don't want to have somebody you can't fire. And if your son-in-law and your daughter are in the West Wing, then they ought to, it's their responsibility to go out of their way to make certain that they are not seen as colleagues of the person in charge of the West Wing. That is to say, they don't see it as peers of the Chief of Staff. They are subordinates who work through and with the Chief of Staff in order to advance the President's agenda. It's incumbent upon them, if they want to make the West Wing work, to restrain themselves. So, look, I had a long-standing relationship with President Bush. We've known each other since I was in my early 20s and he was in his mid-20s. And he made it clear, don't abuse that relationship. Your colleagues, many of whom have known him far a shorter time than I had, those colleagues are critical to the success of this presidency. So be a good colleague and don't abuse that relationship. And it was good advice, and even more important advice when you're the favorite daughter and the son-in-law of the President of the United States. You better make certain that you're serving the President best by serving him through the Chief of Staff.
This White House now, the whole Scaramucci saga, what did you think of that?
Well, first of all, it's sort of painful because I've known Anthony for a long time. He's a brilliant personality. But General Kelly had no other option. I was not surprised that he immediately dismissed him. I would have been surprised had he not. Anthony said things and did things that were inappropriate. You know, I thought it was interesting in retrospect. On Monday last week, he said, basically explained his relationship with Reince Priebus by saying that they were brothers like Cain and Abel. Well, now Axios and the Washington Post have reported that Ivanka and Jared brought Scaramucci into the White House for the purpose of forcing Reince Priebus out, of so discouraging him that he would offer his resignation. Well, that may be true, may not be true, but if it is true, then Cain did kill Abel, but like Cain in the Bible, who was then sent out into the wilderness, Anthony Scaramucci has now been sent out into the wilderness. With
no prospect of a White House job now, I'd imagine, right?
No,
Yeah.
None at all.
All right. Thank you, my friend. Always good catching up with you. Karl Rove.
Hey, I want to say one thing. Barney really made an attempt to lay the predicate for believing that if the market jumps over 22,000, that it's his,
yes,
that he's responsible for that. But markets are forward-looking, and I think the upward movement this morning in the market was they were looking forward to your program.
I totally agree.
If it crosses 22,000, I think it's you, not Varney.
I have so had it with that guy and the fake British accent. I'm up to here.
No, it's not fake, man. That's a real British accent. I hate to tell you that.
Unfortunately,
it's a real
no,
one.
you're wrong. I've got the birth certificate, Brooklyn, New York. You'd never believe it. All right, Karl, thank you very much, my friend.
Thank you, sir.